and welcome to Ungimmicked. We are here for another episode this week, and we're joined by the whole crew. We have Alex Moreau, Connor McDonald, Matthew O'Neill, Sanjeev Vinod. I'm your host. My name is Gonçalo Souza, and we're going to be talking about values in magic. Sanjeev, will you tell us a little bit about that topic?
Yes, Gonçalo, thank you for that. I think that in our mission as magicians to collect the most tricks or do the most performances, we often forget to think about what magic really is and what it's supposed to be. And I think that's what this podcast is really about. So this episode, I want to specifically discuss the values of magic, which is a vague phrase, but I want to talk about questions like, what is the relationship between a magician and an audience? What's the magician obligated to provide? What's an audience obligated to provide? And so I've split this up like so, where in the first half, I want to talk about one specific aspect of this relationship that I find the most interesting. And then in the second half, we'll broaden it out to other aspects of the social contract itself between magician and audience. So to start off this discussion in the first half, all of our daily relationships, friendships, mentorships, parents, family, are based on trust and honesty. And I think the relationship between performer and audience is very similar. But magic is unique in that there is a level of artifice inherent to our art form. So I want to spend this first half talking about what is the role of honesty in magic. Take it away, boys.
Let me start. That's indeed very interesting. Very, very interesting, because it's true that we're at this weird crossroad where we're supposed to be, people trust us with their time, with their attention, their resources, but they're very aware that there are a certain number of things that aren't trustworthy, which is, secrets or methods or whatever. That said, I think most of the time the audience is willing to suspend disbelief, and so suspend not their expectation, but their knowledge of secrecy, and just suspend and say, okay, this is going to be done somehow, but let me put that to the side. Now, that might not always be true, but I feel when I watch really amazing performers, people have a lot of time under their belts, they're very good at giving people that sense of, trust, and where people aren't always suspicious. That might have been a little broad, but I think you guys get the idea.
Yeah, definitely. I really like what you said about suspending disbelief, because magic is very unique in the sense that on one aspect, audiences suspend their disbelief because they sort of go along with us, but on the other hand, we suspend their disbelief by doing seemingly impossible things. Pop Hayden said that in a lecture once that I attended. And
that was too smart for you, that's true.
Oh, you... Oh my god, I make good points. All right.
You do.
So, but the other thing is, it's also really about trust, because they sort of trust the place of trust in which they put the magician is sort of like to basically grab their hand and take them along into the land of wonder, into a place where things happen. And as you said, they sort of accept the fact that you're not going to be giving them all of the information so that you can create this world.
Yeah, I interpreted trust immediately in another way, because you were talking about relationships and the way we trust the people that are close to us. Mm-hmm. My first thought when you said trust from magician to audience member was when somebody is helping the magician, or when the magician puts an audience member on the spot, whether bringing them up on stage, asking them to select a card, asking them to name anything from their seat. There should be, the audience should really trust that the magician is not going to embarrass them, is not going to make them look bad. The trust has to be that they will be having a good time and be portrayed in a good light. I think that's also important.
Yeah, it's a great point. I think, and a lot of times I have seen that trust broken with people being humiliated on stage, or the magician doing something tricky and just fooling the audience, focusing on fooling them rather than having a good time and entertaining them. And so you have to remember that you're there with the audience and for the audience, not for yourself.
And it's a pretty obvious weird relationship with truth that we have, because everyone's aware we have secrets. So it also gives a lot of opportunity for byplay, where people being aware that there are secrets and the magician being aware that the audience is aware. Now it can create this sort of weird vibe that a lot of people can take advantage of trying to portray themselves as honest or else. But I have to say that I think that is scarcely properly executed, and oftentimes where magicians go, I'm not one of those gimmick using sleight of handy guys, I want to be honest, I always find it super awkward. So I would say a lot of people that try to sort of avoid that relationship with dishonesty usually make themselves look more dishonest. So maybe as a magician, embracing the fact that yes, there is something that is hidden from your audience might be a more honest way of doing it than trying to portray yourself as directly honest.
I think you're right. It comes off as cringy and as a trying too hard, and you just come off as a poor, like a worse version of your character than you could have been if you had embraced the fact that we have secrets.
Of course, and it's not necessary. I mean, a lot of people do it really well of portraying themselves as the honest guy.
Absolutely.
But so many people try way too hard, in my opinion.
It can definitely lead you towards overcompensating a little bit if you try too hard. That's sort of like where the line falls, like you were saying, where it they try to do it and then people obviously know they're overcompensating for it. In a way, to keep the honesty, it's sort of like you should admit that you know what you're doing. I don't know if that makes sense. Like, for example, some people will just be honest and say, I love this. I love magic for what it brings. I love magic for these reasons, and I'd like to just express that. And people just simply go along with it, saying, okay, I know he's going to do these certain things, and I'm going to enjoy it. I don't know if that makes sense or not.
I think one thing that was interesting about what both you brought up and Alex brought up is in the quest to acknowledge the audience's intelligence, we sometimes accomplish the exact opposite by almost insulting their intelligence, where every time we say, oh, look, it's clearly not in my sleeves, or, oh, look, I'm not one of those guys, I don't do that, I don't do what you think I'm doing, often the subtext of it is, yes, sure, you're intelligent, you know some things about magic, but I'm still better than you. I still know more things than you. And I think that's probably one of the factors I'd say that really contributes to it coming across as, like, okay, dude, I get what you're trying to say. Really awkward and cringy, like Alex mentioned.
Yeah, I think these are great points. It is almost insulting to the audience to hide the fact that you're doing secrets. I think a lot of people know already that there's some sort of trickery or sleight of hand gimmicky stuff going on. It's what magic is. And
it is what it is.
That is literally what magic is. And I think most people have accepted that, and that's why they're paying money to go see your show. And if you like lie to them in a way and try to hide the fact that you're doing that, that breaks that trust that you have set up, that they've given you. Does that make sense? I mean,
and for one of the best examples, in case some people are listening to us and frowning, thinking, I'm not sure that's a good approach. I mean, look at Darties. Darties is around the table having fun. He's like, I don't know what happened. Just kidding, I know, I do. And every time people laugh, because they know, obviously, he's the guy doing all these miracles. And so just the fact of embracing it can be so good. And even not only in presentation, but look into what you're doing. Let me take example of probably one of the most classic tricks in magic, which is linking rings. When Vernon did the linking rings, it was new, it was brand new. There was this wonderful guy doing, passing metal for metal, and he was the professor of all people. So it was incredible. But now I would argue that in modern day, I'm gonna think if there's a counterexample. I can't think of one, but almost every single routine, linking rings routine I've seen and I've went, oh my god, that was amazing, acknowledge the fact some way that they might be a hole in a ring. Because it's so common knowledge that these people go, okay, I'm not going to insult people's intelligence, they know it. So either I go on their side or address that point. May it be just by script, by the whole routine, by not using a hole, by using a hole and making people essentially disregard the method and just focus on the aesthetic. But the evolution in magic is not only what we're saying, but the way we're acting, and most importantly, what we're doing.
yeah, and I think in that example, Alex, it's with the linking rings, it's there's when you're if I were an audience member trying to figure out how you're doing it, the really only logical explanation,
Yeah.
right? There are only so many options, and yes, sometimes I know we don't talk about methods here, but sometimes method can be very intricate and complex and way beyond the surface value of what it looks like. Something could be going on completely differently and somewhere else, but with something like that, that's just so visual, that happens right in front of your eyes, that's been around for so long, that's been done by so many people. It's just almost
I know,
obvious.
and debunked by so many magic sellers,
Yeah,
and sold as plastic
exactly.
rings in every toy store.
Yes, and
Which is
magic
why
kits
you,
and
you,
stuff like
you
that.
can't ignore the fact that people think or know, or both, that there's a hole in there.
Interesting.
Now, I have a quick question for everyone before we move on to the next point. Has there ever been a point during a performance where you felt guilty for some sort of dishonesty? Because I know doing like sleight of hand, all these intricate quote unquote deceptive methods, I've never felt guilty about it because I know it brings a very positive reaction out of it. But have you ever done something that you would consider dishonest? Maybe has that happened?
For sure. I think this is something that the theorists also talk about, the guilty look that we give our hands, or how we speed past a sleight, things like that, because we do feel, even if consciously we don't, subconsciously our body's like, but that's not what you're doing. So we show that in some ways. But this is something I wanted to present to you guys as well, is recently one approach I've both heard about and been researching into a lot with linguistics and so on, is that it is possible to do magic while telling no lies at all, where you simply state very true things, and the way the audience perceives them, the implications that they draw from them, lead them to lie to themselves. And there's two ways to go about that. One, okay, maybe it assuages our own guilt about lying, but also maybe it's just a roundabout way of doing the exact same things, where explicitly lying to someone and then leading someone to a lie kind of have the same outcome, and so they're not really different. So what are you guys' thoughts on that approach?
Isn't a lot of people who use that approach still lying by omission?
Lying by omission is a very gray area that is often not called lying. So it's called lying by omission because lying does not include that subset, or at least for the sake of this discussion, I don't think it should.
Yeah, exactly. I don't think we should be getting to etymology. But a lot of people have made it an explicit thing to tell openly and secretly, to tell as few lies as possible. You hear some magicians lecturing, telling other magicians to do that, to avoid that feeling of guilt we're talking about, even though you think that you've practiced it so much that you're doing it effortlessly, your body sort of ignores that because it knows better. And some people use it explicitly, saying maybe at the beginning of shows or during tricks they're telling as many lies. I think the former is a more effective approach, to be completely honest. But hey, it has been used, and it's a great tip to give people, is if you can do something for real as opposed to not doing it for real or lying about it, it will always be better.
So you're saying, at least if I'm interpreting correctly, that because we're not lying, we aren't giving off as many of those subconscious tells.
Yeah, exactly. And I'll give you a quick example. When I was a kid, I'm talking kid, I was doing a very basic trick where I just needed to know somebody's card. And so what I was doing is I was saying, and I'm going to shuffle your card, and I controlled it somehow. And it left there. And a very knowledgeable French magician told me, you're saying you're shuffling and you're losing the card, but you're not. And I was saying, yes, but isn't it a secret thing? And he's like, yes, it is. But if you can get away without lying, don't. So just get a way to know that card and then actually shuffle it. And that was a very direct thing that I was involved in, so it made me realize and make me tick.
If for those of you who have ever tried to do a completely conscious effort to tell no lies, maybe Sanjeev you have, I don't know, have you felt better performing it in such a manner, or has it become more cumbersome to try to intentionally find moments to tell the truth at every single point, or technically tell the truth?
I would say for me, intrinsically very satisfying for a few reasons. Where it's almost that artist satisfaction that comes from doing something just for yourself. It is just for me, you know. I don't say in my show, by the way, I'm telling no lies. I think that would, even though I'm saying it honestly, I think it might even come off as an insult to the audience's intelligence. I don't say it, but it's for my own satisfaction. And if people ask me after the show, I can bring it up to them. But I think the main reason it's an approach I enjoy is because this is my research. This is what I do. And so it's interesting to me academically. So I don't know. What about you guys? Have any of you tried to take that approach? How have you felt?
I think it feels wonderful. And because there's so many pitfalls you're not falling into. Like, it's maybe not bringing anything, but you're making so many less mistakes and awkward moments and awkward poses, and all of that just disappears. And usually, also what it does, it forces you to script. Because to avoid telling lies, you need to say what you're saying, and that has its own benefits, as we've talked about extensively on this show. So there's so many added benefits to thinking like that, I believe.
Interesting. Okay, last thing that I want your thoughts on before we close this discussion is what I'm gleaning from all the responses you guys have given is kind of there's this unspoken understanding between the magician and the audience that the audience knows we're hiding things. And we kind of admit that we're hiding things. But maybe the key is that although intellectually the audience knows that they are going to be lied to, at no point during the performance do they want to feel viscerally like they're being lied to. And the moment, maybe this is why so many of the magicians' approaches to solve this fail, is the moment we say things like, look, my hands are empty, or look, nothing in the sleeves. The moment we say things like that, we are bringing the topic of the secret into relevance. And we are reminding the audience of what they're trying so hard to not feel. And that just comes across as, why'd you have to say that? You know, does that kind of make sense? What do you guys think?
Yeah, it's actually, I didn't think of it like that. It's almost this unspoken rule between the audience and the magician that they know that they're being fooled. The suspension of disbelief, is that's kind of what that is. And the more that you bring that to light, the more the audience feels like they're being lied to, and they don't want to know that they're being lied to. Maybe.
Is it the same as like a dancer just telling people they can dance? Because it's sort of like almost a brag when they don't realize it. It's a very subtle brag, like, oh, look, I'm bringing up the point of a secret, but you can't see it, but I'm shoving it in your face instead of just doing beautiful magic.
I'm not sure the analogy is completely relevant.
That's just the first thing that came to my mind, but sort of like the idea of bragging.
Yeah, it is definitely braggy. And the thing is, we have the talent to like put the secret, like make the secret the elephant in the room, just bring it up, slam it onto the table, and then when people bring up the secret, complain that they only care about the secret. I think magicians are really good at that. Like, we're making people care about the secret and complain like, why do these guys only care about the secret?
Yeah,
so that's pretty funny. I really like the way you put it, Sanjeev. I really, really like what you said. I would just add that the audience doesn't want to feel they're being lied to unless there is an external reality's purpose behind it. So if, for instance, in the construction of the story, being lied to and realizing at the end brings something, I don't think it becomes a problem, and it can be played off really well. But if they feel they're being lied to for no apparent reason, I think there's definitely a problem.
Just an important clarification that I want to make just for my own sake, because I think it's assumed, but I want to leave it out there, I mean, is that a slight in itself is not a lie that you're telling to the audience. When you're doing that to me, or I'll say it to me, when you're doing slights, you're accomplishing a method. You are not lying to your audience by doing your magic the way it has to be done. What the important part is that those slights don't lead you to, or don't get you to make them think a certain thing that's not true. I think I made no sense whatsoever, so you can go ahead and dissect that.
One of the funniest things about this whole podcast is that Gonzalo is like trying to go a direction, then Alex's facial expressions is like gravity. He will like just make a face and it'll just shift. He'll be like, "Oh no, actually, what I meant is that the magic is not." And then he's like, "You know, Alex, go."
Can I just say I actually have done that before. Like I've tried to say something and I saw Alex make a face and then I was like, oh, like it wasn't good. And then like I kept talking and then I saw him make an even bigger face. I was like, no, like no.
I'm so sorry, guys.
That is real.
Dude,
That
this
is
might
totally
become-
a real power he has. I just want to let you guys know.
Dude,
It's a good
the
thing, though.
reverse.
Gonzalo,
It's
what
the
were you
straight
saying
reverse
again?
for me.
Gentlemen, I'm gonna call the halfway point right now.
No, you're not, Gonzalo.
Well
You're
played.
not.
What would you
Well
gonna say,
played.
Gonzalo?
We are at 20 minutes of podcast.
We were about to critique
so-
the point you just made, and you just cut it. That is rude.
I'm a
You make a
close.
point. I am
I'm a
taking
close.
over. This is a push.
It's called game theory, guys.
My topic. So I have three things to say. First is Alex has the exact reverse effect. Is when I see him grimace, I double down. I'm like, you know what, my
Let's
boy,
go.
I'm gonna go harder on this. Second is I love something Alex said. Wow, what a contrast between those 2 points. Alex said something great. So I want to underline that often our scripts are so uninteresting that we leave our audience with no question except how did you do that? And when they ask how did you do that, we're like, oh wait, why do you only care about the method? It's about the story. It's about the feeling. But we don't
What
give them a
story?
thing. Exactly. And the last thing I wanted to say is that was the third thing. Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, I would say I completely disagree with you, Gonzalo. I think a slight inherently by default is a lie.
No.
Yeah,
So
that's
I
what
was
he
gonna
was
say if you do something that looks like shuffling but you're doing a sleight and you don't comment on it at all, I would say that's not a lie. But if you're doing something that looks like shuffling and you say, "Let me shuffle and lose the card in the deck," like the example,
Then you
Alex
say
said,
a
why
lie.
Yes.
not? That
Yes.
to me is a lie.
That is the distinction I tried to make and couldn't.
But that's not the
I don't know,
original
I still
question. He's
think
saying,
you
is
could
the
be
slight a
considered.
lie?
Yeah, you can verbally lie or physically lie with the
Yeah,
sleight.
Physically
absolutely.
lie.
It's a
Are you
physical
lying
lie.
with your actions?
And I think
Yeah,
that
it's a
they're
physical
both
lie.
equally a lie.
At
Yeah,
that
I agree.
point, then our art cannot be honest because then no magic happens.
Well, yeah, that's I think the conclusion.
yeah, that's the point.
Thank
No,
you for
we-
concluding.
But
The art cannot be
But
honest.
no, but I'm making the opposite conclusion. I don't conclude that, and I don't agree with that. I don't think that a sleight or a method or whatever word you want to put in here is inherently a lie to the audience because of that trust and expectation we were talking about in the beginning.
Yeah.
An
But lying
audience
is okay,
comes-
and what we
I
when
think
they
we're-
pay that seat in that
we're
theater,
confusing
they're
two things here.
expecting that.
There is an external reality and an internal reality. And the external reality, we need to appear honest to establish that trust and everything we've talked about. And the internal reality, you lie a shit ton as a magician.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
if you put those two things together, you can talk about magic, because magic clearly has two sides. And if you're talking about honesty, if you want to be 100% honest in what you say, what you do, how you act, magic is going to be a toughie. Like, you're probably going to have to figure one thing or two out, but it's going to be
If you want to
probably
do
not
that,
very
seat the
advanced.
audience backstage.
That could be a very interesting thing to do.
No, actually, that's a show idea. I claim.
No, that's. Oh, I'm writing it down. That's a show idea.
I've actually heard the idea of someone wanted. Who was it? I don't remember. The guy wanted
Robert
to do a show
Ramirez did
where people
a
wanted.
show.
Some people take tickets to the front and some people take tickets to the back. And you can only choose one, and one
That's
exposes
cool.
all the methods, and the other one you only get to experience the story.
Oh, that's a really
That's
interesting
cool.
idea.
I might have
Did
stolen
someone do
his
that?
idea
Who
in
did that?
public because he
Oh.
only sold in private.
Implicit breather crimp, guys.
Well,
Speaking
gentlemen,
of which-
speaking of the implicit, I need to make it explicit because we are at our halfway point and we'll continue the discussion on the second half.
Hate
But
you so
it is
much.
time to tell all our viewers to go and check us out on social media, whether that would be facebook.com/ungimmicked or on Instagram @ungimmicked. You can also listen to this podcast in any of the podcasting platforms that you have out there, as well as
Especially
YouTube.
the one you're listening to now.
Especially that one. But also on YouTube, youtube.com/ungimmicked. We also have a Patreon. As my microphone falls and I need to reset my studio. We also have a Patreon. It is patreon.com/ungimmicked. We need to pay that Patreon for my microphone stand not to fall, which we hope will come in very, very soon. I think I've taken enough time. I'm gonna go on to the
We
explicit.
tried our
breather code.
hardest to make that stop. The why should you donate? And you just
It
elegantly
happened.
brought it back in.
It happened right now, so I had to address it.
You
I
had to
could not.
comment.
I could not address it.
That's his
No,
improv
but the
for the day.
breather crimp today is a very special one because it's my own, and I never get to do these. So it's in 18 episodes. 18 episodes. This is the second one I get to do. and I'm going to recommend one of my or my greatest idols, some of my greatest idols in Magic, some of my greatest heroes, Penn and Teller. All of Penn and Teller is absolutely beautiful. So it's there's no one specific thing that I'm going to say. I think it's important to bring them into this discussion because they do talk a lot about the values that they defend in their Magic. The fact that they I mean, Penn talks about it, and Teller sits next to him and shakes his head. Yes, but Penn always says very important things, that their tricks, even though they look dangerous or they look risky, they never put anybody at risk. And they make that contrast with, for example, David Blaine, who just this past week did Ascension, an insane, crazy stunt. Which is putting himself in danger, and then Penn says, well, that's not how we want to portray our Magic, because people could seriously get hurt, and that's not the fantasy that we want to create for our audience. So my recommendation then, I said I wouldn't recommend anything specific, but I will. I'm going to recommend Penn's not Magic. Whether that would be his books, his podcasts, his interviews, I think it's he has a very interesting view on the world and on the world of Magic. Not performing in itself. With my breather crimp over, I will shut up and hand it over to Sanjeev to start this second half.
Thank you. I think towards the end of that first half, we were really touching on a lot of the ideas that segue really well into the second half, where I mainly want to pose the question to you guys about what is this social contract between a magician and an audience. The social contract is, I believe, a Lockean idea, like, used in terms of government, usually the obligations of a government to its citizens and vice versa. But I think that has a pretty straight parallel to performance art in general. So what is the relationship between a magician and an audience? And specifically, what is a magician obligated to provide to the audience? And what is the audience obligated to provide or reciprocate to the magician?
What was that one quote where it was like, being a magician is the world's most honest profession. They say they will fool you, and they do.
I don't know who to attribute it to, because we've heard it so much.
I don't like that quote very much.
I'm not saying, but that is a perspective on this issue, which is that magicians, people know that we have to, at least in the internal reality, deceive you to make magic happen. And that's the end of my point.
Okay, so I have half of this. I think if we're looking at it this way, and I hate looking at it this way, I think it's just this internal struggle that I have with everything that I like to call art, or anything that I like in general. I have difficulty liking the entertainment or business aspect of things, and I think for the magician, it's their job. They are obligated to provide entertainment. And for us, it's the form of tricks and illusions and stuff like that. I'm having difficulty answering what's the audience's job to provide for the magician. Is it just to be an audience?
What does that entail?
To give their time.
Like, to give their time, to sit down and watch, to be the audience. It's
Because
the audience's job to be the audience.
Is it respectfully watching? There's hecklers. What would you say, like, sitting and watching entails? I'm just trying to.
No, that's a great point. I mean, as a magician, obviously, I wouldn't want anyone to be a heckler. So I think maybe respectfully watching. Mm-hmm. If I'm saying this on the spot without thinking too much.
Yeah, respectfully watching, but I feel like the respect has to be
maybe
mutual.
Respectfully engaged. I feel like engaged
Do they
is a
though?
good word.
Because if your show is boring, people will disengage.
What's the magician's job to provide entertainment?
Do they give you
and if the
chance?
If the magician doesn't provide that entertainment, the audience isn't going to respectfully engage.
But that's like a chicken or the egg thing. Who does it? Like, we'll never know who does it first. They
I
sort
would
of
argue
happen
the magician
simultaneously.
It's simultaneous. Like,
yeah,
you
simultaneous.
don't get to say chicken and egg at the same time, but you do get to say the show starts now. Everyone do this and the magician do that, right?
Yeah.
But I was thinking about the center. It's very easy to say really vague. So I tried to do the exercise just saying something direct and to the point. Mm-hmm. I was thinking, okay, what do we need to provide? And the more I thought about it, the more I was thinking, damn, we really don't need much. There's not much we're obligated to. So the thing that came out, and might be completely wrong, but at least it's a thinking point. The only thing we are to provide is a good reason for people to stay. And then we could expand, saying either to stay or to remember, or maybe a good reason to leave. But inherently, I think if they have a good reason to continue watching, or maybe to stop watching, who knows, then maybe that's the... No, in mathematics, we have sufficient conditions and necessary conditions.
Exactly, yeah.
And so I like, if you were to boil it down to a necessary condition, if they have a good reason to continue watching, that might be the most bare bones. Like the center of the onion.
I think that's a necessary condition. I think that's a necessary condition to be a performer or an entertainer, not a magician. I think all you need to be a magician, you need to add the caveat that magic needs to happen in your show.
Oh yeah, a necessary condition is not sufficient.
Did I flip those? I'm sorry.
It's really funny, Alex. I've seen a couple shows where they gave me a damn good reason to leave. Like,
and you know what? Sometimes having a reason to leave might be the point of an artist. You know, to try to stimulate something they created. Most of the time it's just because it sucks. But I want to believe strongly that maybe one day a guy will give me a good reason to leave for the right reasons.
I was just about to say, what if you had a show about that? What if your show was the idea of, I'm giving you a good reason to leave, and that's why you should stay.
Hey, a lot of great premises we're throwing out there for free.
Yeah.
I know, this is
Take it and run with it.
Which are all going down.
Matthew, when he brings his little notebook into frame.
I'll say this. I'll say this to both address points Connor brought up and Alex brought up, where, at least from the magician's side, I would really not feel good about saying that it's a magician's job to definitely entertain, where you need to please your audience, give them what they want. I think the magician side of it, beyond give them a good use of your time, or even that is the goal, give them a good use of your time, but good use is where there's a lot of wiggle room. And I think that's for each magician to decide for themselves. Okay, do you want to give them laughter? Do you want to give them a really enjoyable time? Do you want to make them think? Because those don't necessarily imply each other. You can make an audience think by telling them what they need to hear, not necessarily only what they want to hear. And to me, the more interesting one is the audience's side. And I would say I would not include not heckling and stuff, because I think respect is a basic human requirement. I don't think that should be exclusive to an audience, where you respect other human beings and they respect you. That's why magicians humiliating audience members, that's horrendous to me, because that's not being a bad magician, that's just being a bad human being, right? You're violating a completely different code there. So I think an audience time is really the metric there, where they're giving you their ear for that time. And even their ear might be going a little far, because like Connor mentioned, you have to stay engaged. So the audience gives their time, and the magician gives them what the magician deems as a good use of their time.
What the magician deems? Because the magician's judgment might be way off.
Well, yeah, in that case, the show sucks and people don't stay.
This happens,
you
know?
Oh, yeah, that makes sense.
I don't know if I completely agree. I think that adding either something to think about or an emotion, I think that becomes a second. I think when we're looking at it at its bare bones, it's either I can't decide if it's the entertainment or what Alex said, which I'm probably leaning towards what Alex said because it's Alex, with having a reason to stay. No, I love you, Alex. I respect you. I know, but I'm saying it's one of the two. But if you look at it, they are pretty similar. Entertainment giving them a reason to stay because they're entertained. So I think those two could work together. Although entertainment's a very poor way of looking at it. Yeah.
I don't think it is a poor way. Why? Let me turn the question. Why do you say it's a poor way to look at it? The entertainment value of it. I
would say because when I say the word entertainment, I think of a circus, and I or something more so of surface value, and I personally want to see magic as deeper than surface value. It's about what you say with your magic, but I think for the sake of the conversation and making it what is necessary, I'm just using the word entertainment.
I feel like a lot of magic, or that is supposedly just entertaining, also simultaneously tends to be really low effort. Do you guys feel that? Maybe Sanjeev agrees with me, because I know you're not a fan of the sort of entertainment side of it, but that's a big excuse for low effort magic, which is that it's just entertaining and that's all I'm going for.
Exactly.
Although you could go for it in a very good way too. I mean, a lot of restaurant magic and a lot of like social gig magic that is meant to keep the mood light and simply to be entertainment too. So,
I would qualify, right? Where I really agree with some of the stuff that you said. I do stand by my like the entertainment to art thing where again I will repeat the framework where they might be on two ends of the spectrum, but it's not that you can only be one or the other. It's a matter of what you prioritize. And to me, entertainment inherently prioritizes what the audience would enjoy, what would please the audience, while art inherently prioritizes what you want to say. They are not those aren't exclusive conditions, but priorities, I don't tie things. There's no tied first place priority. It's one or the other. But I do also see what Matt's saying where, again, I do think entertainment's great and I think it's important. Not that I'm not a fan of it, but I do see that some magic uses, oh, but I'm trying to be entertaining as an excuse to not think any deeper about what they're doing. And that is really what frustrates me. I think not thinking is, to me, always bad. Yeah.
spend
And,
money to perform
even if
miracles.
you end up thinking a lot, you might fall back on the, oh, so this is how I need to be entertaining. So it won't necessarily change what you're trying to say, but that path will have taught you so much about yourself, what you're doing, and other people, that it's always worth it.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that thinking happens and you can still choose, I want to be entertaining, but now it's a choice and not something you're just doing because that's just what you're doing. So
Yeah,
I
exactly.
like the way
Forced
you
to be
said
there.
that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And if
Yeah.
you want, just to answer Gonzalo asking Connor, why do you think entertainment is a poor way of thinking? Well, if you need any more mathematics and being brought inappropriately into the conversation, here I am. All I'm saying is that if you're looking at entertainment value, you're essentially looking at the projection of either a magic or a magician onto a single axis. So, if you take like different curves and you project them, some of them might have like really low values on some axes, but they have much more perspective, much more depth, and much other things to look at. So projecting everything onto the entertainment like scale, I guess, is something we do quite often, especially like in dealer pitches or in lectures. But I think it's the wrong way to look at it.
I still count it as a very important metric. You can't just say that entertainment, if it's a sole, because your argument as I understand it is, if entertainment is your sole focus, and tagging along what Sanjay was saying, without thinking about it first, that's a problem. I agree with you.
It's not only sole focus.
It's not sole focus because you can still think and then choose to make it your sole focus.
It's entertainment out of necessity, if that makes sense. Out of like, I have to be entertaining because I literally bought this trick out of a box and I can do it only this one way. And yes, the trick is entertaining by the value that it brings, but what value do I bring?
And I think
Well,
we've
the
talked
fact
about
that
it
you're
previously on
performing
this
it, I don't know.
podcast. It reminded me of the episode where we're saying your main focus can be pretty much anything, and entertainment will probably come with that.
Yes.
That's true.
So if your
Yes.
main focus is entertainment, you're missing all the layers that are above.
I think passively everything needs to be entertaining to keep an audience's attention.
But it's a very
right?
passive
Engagement.
thing to aim for as a magician.
Exactly. Then I think I haven't been. I'm not able to convey myself very clearly because entertainment to me needs to be there. Because if you're presenting magic as artistic, as beautiful as it could be, but if everybody's sitting there bored out of their minds, to me, you've failed. Even if your final
But it
product
tends
is
to be
amazing.
there. It tends to be there,
Well, I mean, if you're gonna look at it that way with the artistic side and you're doing something, I mean, it's your artistic expression, and if the audience doesn't understand it, then that's I mean, it's not your fault, it's not the audience's fault, it's just the way that you expressed it.
But as a show, as you presenting that, you failed because you missed the connection. There was no bridge between you and the audience, and you are the one that has to bridge that. I don't think it's the audience's responsibility to build that bridge. It's our responsibility as the people on stage to reach them. And if
Wait, so how are
if
you
fail
saying
that,
we have to reach them? We reach them
Is-
by entertaining?
Is it a responsibility, or is it something that sort of
I think it's
occurs?
part of the social contract we were talking about.
Yeah.
But
That you
honestly,
engage them.
I really think like the entertainment is very inherent to what we're doing.
Yeah, what we do is intriguing inherently.
That's true. Magic has
So
an
it's very easy to be entertaining with magic. So I think we should usually use that opportunity to aim higher than just to be entertaining. Because damn, that is a sad thing to say for an artist.
Yeah, and also,
Yeah.
we sort of forget how cool, like we're so focused on building our shows and writing our shows and doing all these things. We kind of forget how cool magic is. I was on the phone with my cousin, and he was like, dude, I saw the craziest thing, and it was a mask changing act. And personally, I'm not the biggest fan of mask changing acts. It's sort of, for me, those one things that you see, oh, it's cool. That person put a lot of work into it, but it's not something I'd see 50 times, you know? But he just absolutely loved it. And it's one of those things where, like, what we do is inherently interesting, and I think putting our heart and soul to expand that is probably the best course of action to take.
So then, and maybe this might be where Sanjeev is going, but to wrap it up, what did we conclude is the audience's job and the magician's job?
I think
To exist.
what we've concluded, well, it's not just to exist. I think,
Yeah.
again, it's just as almost a microcosm or macrocosm of our discussion itself. I think because we went through this process of thinking, now we are more aware of it, and we understand it better, and we're more intentional about it because we've thought about it. You know, that's how this whole discussion started, where this is not something we think about often. But here we are thinking about it. And I think now that we've thought about it, we can acknowledge that there are many roles, at least from the magician side for sure, and a big duty we have as good performers, or to be good performers, is to do that thinking and decide for ourselves what we want our role to be. And both, we have to remember two conflicting things. One is that magic is inherently interesting, and we should not forget that. We should not let anyone tell us otherwise. And two, we should strive for more than interesting. We do have a duty to our audience of doing what we think is the best way to spend their time. And if that's something more on the artistic side, making them think, making them uncomfortable. If it's something more on the funny, laugh out loud, easy to take side, we make that choice, and it is our duty to deliver on that choice that we make. And from the audience's side, I think it is very little, except being a human being, giving us that time, which they already have. They've already made the commitment to that going into the show. So now it's only on us to deliver our side of the contract, which I think is a really beautiful place to be in as a performer.
Yeah.
To have everything to give.
Yeah.
I love that.
This discussion went every place I imagined and way more. So thank you, boys, for it. I love it. I love it.
It was a very extensive discussion in the amount of topics that we covered, but I'm very happy with the way it turned out and our conclusion. But before we conclude the podcast in itself, we have one more segment, our weekly assembly, this week presented by Mr. Connor McDonald.
Yeah. So I think this conversation kind of got me thinking with values as a magician and what is your role. And I think it's important to occasionally reflect on what your values are and who you are as a human being. So I kind of have a few questions to ask yourself. If you're not really doing anything, you want to sit down and just kind of figure out who you are and what your values are, or just observe and just think. I have some questions. These are not mine. These are from a website. It's like nickwignall.com. These are not my questions, but I do. I did go over some of these, and I think that it's interesting.
Proper crediting.
So the first one is to pay attention to what bothers you and what bothers other people. Meditate your mind. Identify your emotional kryptonite, my bad. I can't read. Kryptonite.
Yes,
I actually can't read. And draw a timeline of your life and see where it's gone.
Oh, that's cool.
Oh, that's a
And where you are now.
I'm gonna do that. That's awesome.
Would you mind spelling
again, those are
the
just
name of
a
the
few of
website
them.
out?
It's NICKWIGNALL.com. That's the website.
beautiful.
Dude, I hear an ICK anywhere, and I'm like, edie. I have to beat out of myself. Jeez.
Well, gentlemen, thank you so much for another great discussion. We are closing this podcast. To all our listeners, if you don't follow us on social media, go do it. What are you waiting for? And we hope to see you next week. We were joined today by Alex Moreau, Connor McDonald, Matthew O'Neill, Sanjeev Vinod. My name is Gonçalo Souza. Thank you for listening to Ungimmicked.